Tonight on PBS News Weekend, the rising number of bowel cancer cases and the promise of new treatments on the horizon. Then what's behind the lack of affordable rentals in Austin, Texas, even as rents there are dropping? And how our appetite for big amounts of internet data has even bigger costs to the environment.
Researchers think they're in the top 10 water-consuming industries in the U.S. They use 2% of the electricity in the U.S., which is a lot. And a source told me that data center campuses can use the resources equivalent to a small city.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. It's a tale of extremes across the United States. Oppressive heat, wildfires, and flooding hitting many parts of the country. From the Midwest to the East Coast, millions of people are searching for relief from record-setting temperatures. In many places, it feels hotter than 100 degrees, and it's only the beginning. The heat wave is expected to last all weekend, affecting people from the Ohio Valley to the Mid-Atlantic and prompting health warnings.
I don't know how long this is going to continue. It's just horrible.
If you have to be outside for only a minimal amount of time, as much as needed. Definitely drink a lot of water, always stay hydrated.
The extreme weather is affecting travelers too. Amtrak warns customers that some Northeast Corridor trains are traveling at slower speeds because of the heat. That's causing delays of up to an hour. In the West, a wildfire in New Mexico has taken root and spread quickly. Residents said an orange and black haze quickly filled the skies. The village of Ruidoso ordered residents to evacuate. The town's mayor said entire neighborhoods have been destroyed. And in Northeast Iowa, a different kind of extreme weather. Weeks of rain have sent the Rock River overflowing its banks, forcing people out of their homes. An Arkansas man is facing capital murder charges stemming from the grocery store shooting that killed 3 people and wounded 11 others, several of them critically. Police say 44-year-old Travis Eugene Posey opened fire yesterday inside the store in the small Arkansas community of Fordyce. That's about 70 miles south of Little Rock. Authorities say Posey only stopped firing when he was wounded in a gunfight with police that injured 2 officers. The death toll in Gaza climbed higher today following 2 Israeli airstrikes on separate locations. One hit a refugee camp and another struck an eastern neighborhood of Gaza City. Palestinian and hospital officials said at least 39 people were killed. Israel's military said they were targeting 2 Hamas military sites. And in Tel Aviv tonight, thousands of people rallied to demand new elections and call for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach a deal to bring hostages home. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia has launched more than 2,400 guided missiles at Ukrainian targets this month alone. His remarks followed a deadly day of attacks that killed 3 people and injured dozens more in Kharkiv, that's Ukraine's second largest city. Zelensky said Ukraine needs more help from Western allies. And a new chapter in an unsolved mystery. Las Vegas police said they removed a tall monolith from a remote part of the Nevada desert. They said the 6'4" structure was a public safety and environmental hazard. Just how it got there is anybody's guess. It's the latest in a series of mysterious monolith placements around the world since 2020, including in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Turkey. The Nevada monolith, made of sheet metal, rebar, and concrete, is being held at an undisclosed location. Police are trying to figure out how to best store it or dispose of it. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, struggles renters in Austin, Texas are facing as they hunt for affordable housing, and the big environmental cost of big data.
This is PBS News Weekend from WETA Studios in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
Bowel cancer, or cancer in the colon or rectum, is the second leading cause of cancer deaths worldwide, killing nearly 1 million people a year. And cases of colorectal cancer have been on the rise, especially among those younger than 50. But there are glimmers of hope for patients with a certain type of bowel cancer in two separate studies, one in the United States and a more recent one in Britain. Each found that using immunotherapy drugs before surgery dramatically increased the chance of curing bowel cancer in patients with a certain genetic profile. Dr. Vikram Reddy is chief of colon and rectal surgery at the Yale School of Medicine. He's not affiliated or connected with either of these studies. Dr. Reddy, how big a deal is this?
So this is a huge deal for us because it's a new category of medications that we can use to treat patients with bowel cancers.
And immunotherapy drugs, tell us what is immunotherapy and how does it work?
So immunotherapy is different from conventional chemotherapy. So immunotherapy actually augments and uses your own immune system to fight the cancers. Whereas the old conventional chemotherapy, we were targeting the cancer cells and killing them with drugs.
And are immunotherapy drugs used in other types of cancer?
Oh yeah, immunotherapy drugs have been used in other kinds of cancers for a while. But recently, we've been using them for colorectal cancers.
What more do you want to know about these drugs? They're going to continue the clinical trials, sort of looking at long-term results and relapses. What else do you want to know? Or what should the researchers be looking at?
I think with the immunotherapy trials, we're seeing a lot of promise in them treating colorectal cancers. We want to see if they can maintain those over a longer period of time. So whenever we have a patient with cancer, we follow them for 5 years or even more to make sure the cancer doesn't come back. Now, most of these trials have been going on for about 1 year to 2 years. So we have short-term data. They're very promising. We just want to make sure there's a sustained response even 5 years out.
And as I understand it, they've only been testing, or this only been effective, found to be effective among patients with a certain genetic pattern. How widespread is that? How many colorectal cancer patients have that genetic pattern?
So about 15% of the patients have these types of cancers called mismatch repair deficient type of colon cancers. So in those patients, these immunotherapy drugs can work beautifully. In the past, conventional chemotherapy was not effective against these patients, but now with immunotherapy, we can actually make a difference for these patients.
Why are cases of colorectal cancer on the rise, especially among young people?
So it's a multitude of factors. One, our diets have changed. So diets high in red meat, processed meat, sugars, sedentary lifestyle, these are all associated with an increase in colorectal cancers. And unfortunately, all of these are going up over the past 2 decades. And that's why we're seeing an increase in colorectal cancers.
Does it suggest that there should be screening earlier or screening in particular cases earlier?
So in the older days, before 2021, we used to actually start screening people starting at the age of 50, and in Blacks, we used to do it at 45. But in 2021, we actually changed the guidelines to start screening at 45. But unfortunately, we even see patients as young as 2018 who are getting colorectal cancers. So even now, what I tell everyone is that if they have any bleeding, like rectal bleeding, if they have abdominal pain, if they have change in their bowel habits, like, if you're usually having one bowel movement a day and now you're constipated or you're having diarrhea, which persists, I say get a colonoscopy because it can diagnose you. It can even treat an early polyp. It can even get rid of the cancer if it's early stage. So a colonoscopy is important, but unfortunately, screening by itself only starts at 45.
And we said in the introduction about how prevalent deaths from colon cancer are in terms of cancer deaths. But if it's caught earlier, does that change that sort of prognosis?
Oh yeah, early stage cancers, the survival is so much better than advanced or metastatic cancers. Once it metastasizes, our survivals are still pretty good, but you're talking about maybe 50% survival if you resect all metastatic disease. If you can't resect metastatic disease, the survival is much lower. So if you catch them early, you're looking at almost close to 100%. And especially if you have this MMR deficient, which is the mismatch repair deficient kind of cancers, with these new category of drugs, you're talking about a cure.
Earlier, we talked about the things that seem to be contributing to the increased number of colorectal cases. What can people do? Are there things people can do in terms of diet, in terms of lifestyle, to reduce the chances of developing colorectal cancer?
Absolutely. What I tell patients are, try to minimize how much red meat you eat, and pork counts as a red meat. The second thing is try not to eat any processed meat. Third thing, try to increase your fiber intake. Fiber intake usually comes from fruits and vegetables, so increase your fiber intake to about 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. Fourth thing, there's some data to show that 2 tablespoonfuls of tree nuts like walnuts, almonds, or pecans can actually decrease the incidence of colorectal polyps and colorectal cancers. So I tell them to do those. The last thing is 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week can actually, mitigate the incidence of colorectal cancer.
Dr. Vikram Reddy of the Yale School of Medicine, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
The latest inflation numbers show that nationwide rents have cooled from historic highs, but it's not reaching every rental market or every renter. Austin, Texas is one of the places where rents are showing a downward trend, but lower income families there say their rents are often staying the same or even going up. Blair Waltman-Alexan of Austin PBS tells us who's getting a deal in the Texas capital and who's not.
Está bien.
Marilu Jaimes had achieved that rare dream in Austin, finding an apartment that was close to everything she needed.
Estaba cerca de la biblioteca, cerca de...
It was close to the library, close to the grocery store, close to my daughter's school, also from work. It was the best. I was close to everything. Now I feel like I'm going to use a lot of gas.
She's worried about burning gas because soon she will be moving about 45 minutes outside of town. She's leaving because her rent's gone up and she can't afford to stay.
Antes pagaba...
I used to pay $1,040, and suddenly that was raised to $1,530. It doesn't seem fair to me that after so many years, they simply raised the rent so much that we have no other option but to leave this place.
But reports show that rents are going down in Austin. A study by Rent.com showed rents dipping more than 12% year over year.
Yeah, so it's not all bad.
Jake Wegman is an associate professor in the Community Regional Planning program at the University of Texas.
We were flooded with headlines about how all of America was moving to Austin, and developers responded to that.
So Austin's population increased, especially during the pandemic, about 6% between 2020 and 2022. And demand for housing increased as well. This drew a lot of developers to build apartments, and maybe, as it turned out, too many apartments. One report showed that as of last fall, almost 20,000 more multifamily units were delivered than released. And it's got some landlords offering deals to bring in tenants.
Maybe 2 years ago, they'd feel like they were jostling for an apartment, and now the landlord is saying, hey, if you sign this 12-month lease, then I'll give you a month or more of free rent.
So I would say the biggest thing has been rent increases, and we're seeing that throughout Austin in a lot of low-income housing properties specifically.
Jasmine Rivera is an outreach specialist with BASTA, a group that works with low-income renters like Jaimes. She says they see residents struggling with a very tight housing market.
We do have a lot of folks that are saying there's no housing I could find that's within my range that I can afford right now, and so they're definitely moving to the outskirts of Austin, which is really, really hard.
That's the challenge Jaimes found herself in.
Well, I thought about moving, and that's what I'm going to do because I have no other option. It's too much money. I can't pay it because I can't pay so much rent alone.
So if there are all of these new apartments, why can't lower-income families find a place to stay?
Most of our newer housing remains unaffordable if it's market rate. Of course, if we created...
Avez Ashar is with Housing Works Austin, and he says part of the problem with a lot of these new buildings, they're aimed at high-income earners. Nationwide, 89% of new apartments built in the last couple of years were considered high-end. They're also the ones getting deals on rent. One report showed that in Texas cities, luxury apartments saw bigger price drops than middle-tier rentals.
What we're seeing in terms of construction of housing is we're seeing, of course, some more higher end apartments being built. At the same time, this gap between housing costs and the gap between income has been growing for over a decade in Austin and other parts of the nation.
This earning gap didn't just increase the going rate for housing in Austin. It also skewed a number that has a big impact on low-income housing, the median family income, or MFI, sometimes referred to as the AMI, or average median income. Noelia Mann, interim director of the eviction mitigation team at BASTA, explains.
So if you're having an influx of high income earners, right, that's going to tip the scale. But for the most part, newer affordable housing programs are actually tied to the AMI. The AMI goes up, but like a working class family's income is not increasing in the same way. So the affordability, I would say, is actually going the opposite way. Like it's getting less affordable for regular working class people in Austin.
So when the MFI increases, the amount landlords can charge for affordable housing also increases. But experts say wages for lower income workers aren't keeping up. And rents are still above pre-pandemic levels, even with the price drops. Azhar says high housing costs can eat into other parts of a family's budget.
Once folks spend more than 30% of their income on housing and utility-related costs, that means they're cutting funding from somewhere else, whether that's childcare or healthcare or other basic provisions of life. Even though I know we're hearing a lot about how rents have, comparatively gone down to their peak during the pandemic, we're still seeing that they're high enough for a lot of households to be struggling.
Jake Wegman says there is a silver lining here for affordable housing advocates.
This is a great time for the public sector and for nonprofits to scoop up land and to scoop up projects at a lower rate. Maybe they are now able to acquire more projects during a downturn like this than they had been planning on.
The city is still pursuing its housing goals. Voters approved $300 million in 2020 for anti-displacement efforts as part of the new Project Connect transit plan. But those plans will take time to come together. For Jaimes and others who can't afford their rent now, once she puts in her notice, she says she has about 60 days.
We found a place to live together, so there's no other option.
For PBS News Weekend, I'm Blair Waltman-Alexan in Austin.
The rise of artificial intelligence is requiring faster and bigger computations for even simple tasks than for, say, a Google search. It's adding to the demand for more internet data centers, the places that house all those servers that keep the internet running. But as Ali Rogan reports, there's a price to pay for that.
Demand for data centers is growing rapidly, but these facilities come at a big environmental cost, especially for the communities that host them. Northern Virginia is the largest data center hub in the world. The area is responsible for processing nearly 70% of global digital traffic. It's a rate that local officials say is unsustainable. Sachi Kitajima-Mulkey is a science journalist and writer for the climate-focused news outlet Grist. Sachi, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, tell us a little bit more about what a data center is and why do we need so many of them?
Whenever we use the internet, upload photos to the cloud, send emails, watch a video, all of that data and digital information needs a home, and it lives in these huge facilities called data centers, which hold tens of thousands of servers each, and they process all that digital information for us. Something like 70% of the world's digital information is processed by a cluster of data centers in Virginia alone, and there are over 5,000 facilities in the US.
What are the environmental impacts of having some of these data centers in your backyard?
So to process all that information, they need two things. The first is electricity, of course, to physically crunch and process all that gigabyte going on. The other is water, which are used in cooling systems to protect these servers from physically overheating. And researchers think they're in the top 10 water-consuming industries in the US. They use 2% of the electricity in the US, which is a lot. And a source told me that data center campuses can use the resources equivalent to a small city. And as AI booms, they'll use even more. The average AI application uses 6 times the amount of electricity, so they run a lot hotter, and that scales exponentially. They just need more water to cool down.
And how do these data centers in the United States and around the world affect global efforts to decarbonize?
It's tricky because right now we are building out green energy solutions at a great scale. It's happening really fast, but it might not be happening fast enough. Currently, a lot of the grid is still running on fossil fuels, and even plans in Virginia to shut down, coal firing plants may not go through because these data centers need so much energy that grid operators need to fire those coal plants back up or just keep them running in order to meet all that demand. So, and one of the talking points of these data center reform coalitions I've spoken to is that it's a step backwards from clean energy goals and kind of almost a betrayal of some of the promises certain states have made to, get off of carbon.
And many of these data centers are located in densely populated residential areas. What's it like to live near one?
Yeah, they're being built near schools, neighborhoods, protected nature parks in Virginia in particular. And one big impact is that they're really loud. They hum and they bring all this noise pollution to the area. All that concrete also means a huge increase in stormwater runoff because that rain can no longer soak into the ground. It all has to go somewhere. And so the amount of electricity also could be more than the grid may be able to handle. So when there's an outage, there's kind of a question of who gets the power, residents or data centers.
We're talking to you now via Skype. We're using a lot of data to do it. As we increasingly rely on this type of cloud computing to do so many things, we use apps, we do virtual meetings, that kind of thing. Is there any way that these data centers can continue to expand, continue to grow and support all this usage, but do so in a more environmentally friendly way?
It is possible to build cooling systems that use less water, but we don't really see those built out at scale yet. And you could power them with green energy, but again, right now we have a grid that's kind of stuck on fossil fuels, and we're slowly making the transition to green energy, but maybe not fast enough to meet all this demand. First, before we can really know what we need to do next, we just need more transparency from the industry, which scientists and activists both told me is pretty secretive. Google is saying it's a leader in sustainable data centers, and they only began releasing their water usage data a couple of years ago after a lawsuit.
And to that transparency point, I want to play for you a soundbite from an environmental activist in Northern Virginia, as we've said, where so many of these data centers are located.
One of the big things that concerns me is that some of these data center companies are claiming to be holding federal or Department of Defense servers, and therefore they're critical infrastructure and cannot be allowed to go down. And so there's this question of who gets the water in a drought situation, and are they going to leverage that kind of argument of national security to potentially say they get the water first?
Are there any safeguards that exist to make sure that these companies are being honest about the types of companies that they're supporting with their servers and what the effect on the environment is?
We're kind of trusting companies to be transparent and do the right thing. A lot of companies like to tout sustainability goals, but truthfully, we're trying to get laws through in Virginia right now. A couple of bills were introduced in Virginia and in other states, but they're not getting a lot of traction until we have that research we need. And so right now, Virginia is conducting a data center impact study, and the results of that will come out later this year, hopefully. I mean, we're just seeing a lot of action in Virginia in particular. The Piedmont Environmental Council is a group that has this coalition called the Data Center Reform Coalition, and they just started this year really digging in, organizing their community together with hundreds of individuals and nonprofits on board. And they're working directly with lawmakers too to see what they can do and how they can keep this industry a little bit more accountable. They also are taking action through Freedom of Information Act requests to see what other kinds of information they can learn about these data centers even before the transparency is coming from the companies themselves.
Science journalist Sachi Kitajima-Mulkey, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
On the latest edition of PBS News Weekly, Nick Schifrin has an in-depth look at the latest developments in the war between Russia and Ukraine. All that and more is on NewsHour's YouTube channel. And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. On Sunday, how one ninth grader is helping restore Mississippi's endangered oyster reefs, one oyster at a time. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
President Joe Biden.
What is the risk in 2024 of our freedom, our very democracy?
Former President Donald Trump.
We're going to make America great again, and we're going to do it fast.
The candidates face off on the economy, the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, and the future of the country. A PBS News simulcast with analysis of the CNN presidential debate, Thursday, June 27th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central.
You're watching PBS.